Alan Dershowitz is a lawyer, law professor, and author. In 1990, Hollywood turned one of his most controversial cases into a movie, Reversal of Fortune. Dershowitz represented Klaus von Bülow, a British socialite charged with the attempted murder of his wife Sunny, who went into a coma. Investigators believed Klaus over-medicated Sunny, injecting her with too much insulin. After the conviction in the first trial, Dershowitz got an acquittal in the retrial. Then in 1995, Dershowitz joined the O.J. Simpson defense team as an appellate advisor. His job was to look for mistakes in the trial, and if there had been a conviction, they would have gone on to fight in round 2. That wasn't necessary because Simpson was found not guilty. In 2008, Dershowitz was a member of the legal team for Jeffrey Epstein, charged with soliciting sex from minors. Dershowitz was a personal friend of Epstein and was successful in getting Epstein a lenient pre-trial agreement. Alan, thanks for doing the interview.
Thank you for having me.
How many books have you written?
57. My wife calls me the Heinz writer because 57 varieties. This is my 57th book. I'm working on my 58th book. It has an interesting title. It's called Trump to Harvard, Go Fund Yourself.
Clever. Good title.
Yep.
Tell me about how you came to the title of this book and what does it mean?
I've been, believe it or not, working on this book for 60 years. I write my books up generally very quickly, but when I started teaching at Harvard in 1964, I started to teach about prevention. Nobody had noticed that the trend has been away from reaction and toward prevention. I noticed it. I discovered it. I taught courses in it. I wrote articles about it. And for years, I've wanted to write my magnum opus, my kind of summary book on the preventive state. And finally, I did it. So if I'm going to be remembered for anything in the future, it's going to be for this book, The Preventive State, because it tries to construct a jurisprudence about how we deal with this incredibly important phenomenon that relates to all of us. You have COVID. What do you do to prevent it? George Washington wrote a letter to his troops, I quote it in my book, in which he said, we may not lose the war to Great Britain, but we will lose it to smallpox unless every single soldier is inoculated. So we've been involved in the preventive issues for many, many, many years, and we're just doing it more, but we just don't have a jurisprudence, and we make lots and lots of mistakes.
What is your favorite chapter of the book, or which one do you think will resonate most with someone that's had no exposure to your work before? They're new to Alan Dershowitz, so start here.
I would start maybe with free speech. That censorship is a method of preventing speech from turning into violence. So the old notion, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, which I attack and talk about. As long as there's been free speech, there's been censorship. So that's one. I go from free speech then to nuclear weapons and everything in between. Deportation is a mechanism of prevention. Indeed, it's the oldest mechanism. We used to exile people. And what does exile mean? It means deport. So our use of deportation today against gang members and predators is another instance of the use of the preventive state. But we aren't doing it right. We don't have our due process in order. We don't have our jurisprudence in order. We're just doing it in an ad hoc way. And I think we have to do it in a more improved and better way.
What do you make of what's happening now?
I don't like it. I mean, I like the goal of making sure that people can't come into this country to commit crimes, but I think we have to have a better system of due process. I've come up with a couple of suggestions. Give you one example. If you think people are in the country illegally and are criminals, and if you have probable cause, that's what you need to conduct the search, then you can deport them. But they have to have the right to go to the American embassy and by Zoom have a deportation hearing. And then if they win that hearing, they can come back to the United States. So in that way, you solve the immediate problem of getting them out of the country, but you give them their full panoply of rights. Remember, due process is not the same for everybody. If you or I are charged with a crime, we're citizens, we have full panoply of due process rights. But if a person from Qatar comes to Harvard on a student visa and doesn't use the student visa to learn, but uses it to make anti-American speeches, then the due process that he's entitled to is far, far less. And we're entitled to take away his visa if he obtained it by false pretenses. So due process is a sliding scale, variable, and we need to figure out what a jurisprudence is for any kind of prevention, whether it be, are we allowed to inoculate people against their will? Are we allowed to make them wear masks if they're exposed to serious illnesses? To, can we deny bail to somebody who's presumed innocent, but who we fear might commit crimes during the hiatus? All of these are preventive decisions.
A lot of what I'm hearing you say sounds kind of like, how do we fix our country? And I know there's so many different ideas about that. But it seems like you want to be a voice in that conversation.
Yes.
But you've never run for office.
No.
Why?
I could never run for office because I'm independent. I like to do things.
There's a huge appetite for independent candidates right now.
Yeah, but not within the parties themselves.
Okay.
And it's hard. I thought about it. When I was a kid, when I was in my 20s, I was first in my class in law school, and I was well known in my community, and people said, go and run for Congress. When I was very young, Ted Kennedy offered to consider me for a judgeship when I was 35 years old. And I thought about it, and I decided I'm just not an insider. I'm not the government type. I'm an outsider. I'm an iconoclast. I'm always going to be somebody who challenges everything. I'm not the easiest person to get along with because I'm contentious and I don't like to suck up to people. So I don't think I'd be a particularly good politician.
I think some people might argue that's exactly the kind of personality that we need right now.
Oh, I would agree.
Would
but
be attractive. You have the ear of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Who's the most frustrating?
Well, I think probably Donald Trump because he has so much talent. And
does he listen to you?
I think he does, but he listens to other people too. He tends to listen to the last person he spoke to, and when he speaks to me, he really does listen. I'll tell you a story. So I was invited to go speak at Mar-a-Lago between the time he was elected and the time he was inaugurated about a film that was being made about lawfare. And the president learned that I was going to be speaking, so he decided to come and listen to my speech. And I said, please, Mr. President, and please, Republicans, don't try to get even with the Democrats. They treated you horribly. Lawfare, charging you with crimes that didn't exist. You're so tempted to try to get even. Don't do it. Just drop lawfare. And I saw the president nodding and shaking his head in agreement. That made me feel very good. Now, is it happening? It's a matter of degree. I don't like when this administration goes after people to get revenge. I didn't like when the previous administration went after people. The worst single case in my 60 years of experience as a criminal lawyer, the worst case has been the prosecution of President Trump in New York for paying hush money to that woman. There was nothing to the case, but he was convicted by a New York jury. And I just don't want to see that happening to either side. I want to see both sides pass what I call the shoe on the other foot test.
What about the Mar-a-Lago's documents case? Did you spend any time looking at that? What did you think of the strength of that case?
It was a very strong case. It was an open and shut case. He was clearly guilty, but so was Biden, and so was Obama, and so were many other people. So it was a case of selective prosecution. But they had the videotape of him showing classified material to a journalist and saying, I should have declassified this, but I didn't. But I think the court came to the right conclusion, throwing out the case because the prosecutor had been improperly appointed, and it was very much a political case.
The judge has made that go away very neat and tidy for
Yes.
President Trump.
Well, I think that the judge did the right thing. I'm a fan of that judge. Many other people are not. I think she's done a good job.
But I want to press you on this because what I'm hearing you say is the case was strong, but prosecuting him for it and not previous presidents who've done the same thing with the same type of material is wrong on its premise.
That's right. And I think you have to have equal justice. You cannot suddenly say that a president who brings classified material home is going to be prosecuted when previous presidents have never been prosecuted. So I was very satisfied with the decision, but had there been a trial, he probably would have been convicted.
Klaus von Bülow, Jeffrey Epstein, O.J. Simpson. History is going to look at these guys as villains.
They were.
And there you are.
Yeah.
Defending them.
Yeah.
Allied with them.
Yeah.
How does that sit with you?
Very well. I mean, it sits with me the same way it would have sat with John Adams when he was criticized for defending the people who were accused of committing the Boston Massacre. Look, Klaus von Bülow was not a very good husband. O.J. Simpson was not a very good husband, and Jeffrey Epstein did some terrible, terrible things. But the job of the criminal defense lawyer is to defend the guilty and the innocent. Look, the vast majority of people charged with crime in America are guilty, and thank God for that. Would we want to live in a country where the majority of people charged with crime were not guilty?
Now that he's dead, will you say that O.J. is guilty?
Well, I would say that there was sufficient evidence to convict O.J. Simpson, but the evidence was obtained improperly.
Okay.
And
I'm asking you, do you have any devil or angel on your shoulder about this, Alan, when you look at yourself in the mirror? Like, a lot of people believe that O.J. did it.
Well,
do you?
I'm not going to say about any particular client. I would say there was
You
enough,
won't say? Even with him being
even
dead and gone?
Yeah. There's enough evidence to have convicted him. There was certainly enough evidence to have convicted O.J. Simpson. I don't think there was enough, Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think there was enough evidence necessarily to convict Klaus von Bülow. Every case is different, but when I take a case, I don't ask myself the first question, is he guilty or innocent? The first question I ask is, were his constitutional rights violated? Are there important legal issues involved in this case? And I represent the guilty along with the innocent, just like emergency room doctors represent and take care of sick and contagious and terrible, terrible people. That's my job. Just like priests, they don't ask when somebody comes in and seeks religious counseling and salvation, they don't ask, are you guilty or innocent? In fact, the priest can't even disclose what he learned under any circumstances.
So there's no moral dilemma for you? None?
No, there's a moral dilemma personally. I don't like most of my clients, but it's very important for me to defend them and to defend them vigorously. When I was defending the Queen of Mean, Leona Helmsley, we were sitting and having breakfast one day, preparing for a case in court, and I got served, it was in a hotel, and I was served a cup of tea, and a little of the liquid was in the saucer. She saw it and she got furious, and she took the cup in the saucer and threw it against the marble floor, broke into a dozen pieces, and she said to this young busboy, now get on your hands and knees and beg me for my job. And I said, Leona, this is the last time I'm ever going to be with you in a private or public setting. I'll be with you in court, but I don't like you, I don't admire you, and I'm going to be your lawyer, but I'm never going to be your friend.
I'm smiling because those are the kind of stories that I love. Do you have a story like that with, how about Patty Hearst?
You know, I never really got to know Patty Hearst because she was a fugitive, and I consulted mostly with F. Lee Bailey, so she's not a case. Recently I was at a dinner party and a woman was sitting next to me, a really nice, charming woman. We were talking and she said, well, what do you think of Patty Hearst? And I said, well, I've never met her, but I think she was properly pardoned. She said, I'm glad because I'm her sister.
Whoa!
And I had never really got to know Patricia Hearst, but I had a woman who I saved her life. Did her case pro bono, free. Never met her until years later because she couldn't afford to fly me out to Arizona where she was in prison. I argued the case, or Nevada, she was Nevada, I'm sorry. I argued the cases, I won, she got free, never met her.
There are so many documentaries out right now about O.J. and the Menendez boys.
Sure.
Like, there seems to be like the 90s are back in, and the big high-profile cases of the 90s are back in. Why is that happening now, do you think?
Well, the 90s were a very interesting period of time. Most of my important cases, O.J. Simpson, Klaus von Bülow, Mike Tyson, Mike Milken, all in the 90s. For some strange reason.
Do you miss them? Do you miss the 90s?
I miss the 90s. I had my biggest bestseller, Chutzpah, #1 bestseller of the New York Times in the 90s.
For the person who doesn't know what that means, I know what that means. What does that mean?
Chutzpah?
Yeah.
It means a kind of an unwillingness to accept second-class status, a willingness to fight back, a little bit of arrogance, pushiness. It's a quality that if it goes too far, you're not going to like it. But if it doesn't go far enough, it's not good either. You have to have a balance of chutzpah. And so I hope I have the right balance. Probably too much. I probably have too much.
Ball buster?
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's the Yiddish phrase for a woman who is really a good housekeeper. The Yiddish term is bala buster, and everybody uses ball buster for that one. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some of the cases that are making headlines right now, and let me pick your brain about them. Do you follow the Karen Reed case out of Massachusetts? Harvard guy, Massachusetts. Do you know about that one?
Not much. Not enough to really intelligently comment.
What about Diddy?
Diddy's going to be found guilty, and it's going to be reversed on appeal.
Okay.
There's no reason why that videotape, that horrible videotape of him kicking and beating this woman, should have been shown to the jury. He wasn't charged with that. He's charged with RICO violation and conducting a sex whatever. But when you watch that video, how do you acquit him? You want that guy to go to jail once you've seen that video.
What's your criteria for taking a case?
I have to be pissed off. I have to really be angry. It has to keep me up at night. I have to say I can't live with this. I just don't want to see this go down the way it is. Sometimes.
But it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. It's interesting to me that that's what you're saying. Notwithstanding if you think the person did it or didn't do it.
That's right.
It's about if something on the prosecution side or the burden of proof pisses you off,
it's
then you'll
more
take
about the government, because the government poses the greatest danger to our civil liberties, not individual criminals. So I'm always putting the government on trial in my head and in the courtroom and in my books. I always put the government on trial.
Has there been someone over the course of your career or recent memory where you've thought, somebody ought to put that guy on trial, but never did?
Oh, I'm sure there are a lot of cases like that. I know a lot of lawyers who ought to be in jail, who are doing terrible, terrible things. In the Me Too movement, for example, the Me Too movement was very good. It exposed a lot of predatory men who did terrible things. But along came a bunch of lawyers who persuaded women and sometimes men to make false charges. I think it was Eric Hoffer, the philosopher, who once said, it starts as a cause, then it becomes a movement, then it becomes a business, then it becomes a racket. The Me Too movement is in the racket stage.
Ooh, that's an unpopular thing to say.
Oh, yeah, and I was the victim of it, of course.
Yes, Professor.
Because I was falsely accused by a woman I never met, never heard of. And she ultimately, basically, withdrew all of her charges against me and said, she may have confused me with someone else and misidentified me, but she cost me $5 million in legal fees to fight for my own reputation. And people still think, oh my God, if he's accused, he must have done something wrong. I have never had sex with anybody but my wife during the entire time I knew Jeffrey Epstein. That's why I'm happy to talk about it.
You don't contend that he's a victim of the Me Too movement, do you, Professor?
No, he was a predator, and he did some terrible things, and he pleaded guilty to some of the things he did.
He got a sweetheart deal here in Palm Beach County.
Well, he was only charged with 2 offenses in Palm Beach County.
And that part of it was the sweetheart deal, because there were
other
charges.
people, but many of them hadn't yet come forward.
Are your hands on that, Professor?
I was part of the deal, but he hated the deal, and he refused to pay my legal fee, and he fired me as his lawyer because he thought the deal was terrible because he had to go to jail. So it's in the eye of the beholder. I'm trying to get the best deal I can, always. I mean, if I fail to get the best possible deal, I haven't done my job.
What happened to him?
Either he was helped by people in the prison to commit suicide. He didn't commit suicide by himself, that's clear. Either he was helped to commit suicide or somebody killed him. And I don't know the answer to that question. I think it'd be very hard to get people into a prison to kill him. And especially that Monday, they were going to be arguing for his bail, and he had a good chance of getting bail. And the biggest mistake he made, just forget about the terrible things he did, he was living nicely in Paris, and he couldn't have been extradited from Paris. And he came to the United States, and his lawyers, I had stopped being his lawyer 10 years earlier, but his lawyers apparently didn't give him sufficient warning that he might be under investigation. I never would have encouraged him to come back to the country because we knew they were out to get him, and for good reason.
What if Ghislaine came to you, asked for help?
I would help her. I think she has been mistreated. I think her sentence is way, way, way too long, and I would hope that the president might consider commuting her sentence.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Talk more.
Well, she was a victim as well. I mean, she was a perpetrator and a victim, both. She was his partner, but...
Did you ever meet her? You've met her.
Yeah, I've met her a number of times. I met her before I knew Jeffrey Epstein. I met her through her father and her mother.
Yeah.
I knew her through her English connections and through her Israeli connections.
Do you think because he's dead and gone now, we as a culture need a fall guy?
Absolutely.
And it's going to be her?
Oh, I think if he hadn't died, she never would have suffered the consequences she'd suffered. And the idea of such a long sentence that she would, possibly even die in prison is much, much disproportionate to what is alleged against her.
All right, last question, and that is, you tell me. Mike, ask me this. It's the wild card question.
Okay, let me think about that for a second.
Could be about anything.
Mm-hmm. I know. Ask me what the most satisfying legal experience I ever had in my life.
Professor, what is the most satisfying legal experience you've had in your life?
Easy question. I represented a man named Anatoly Sharansky, a Soviet dissident who had been sentenced to die first. They said he was an American spy, but he wasn't. Then he was sentenced to essentially life imprisonment. And I spent 8 years of my life pro bono traveling back and forth to the Soviet Union and around the country defending him. And finally, I helped arrange a spy trade. And I got him out, and he threw his arms around me, and he whispered in my ear in Hebrew, "Blessed are those who free the imprisoned." And for me, that was the biggest fee I ever earned. I didn't earn any money, but it was the biggest fee because there, but for the grace of God, go I. I could easily have been the dissident if my family had stayed in Eastern Europe, and he could have been the lawyer if his family had come to America. So that was the most gratifying legal case of my life.
Point well made. Good question, good answer.
Thank
it was
you.
a pleasure to talk to you.